My husband got fired for sexual harassment and then did it again at the very next job. He fed her 5-month-old eggs. She ended up in the emergency room. And when she threw out the expired food so it could never happen again, he lost his mind over it. That is the moment you need to hold in your head as we walk through this entire situation, because everything else that comes after it makes a lot more sense when you start there. This is a man who earns 6 figures, has 0 debt, and lives in a flat that his parents bought for him outright. His cost of living is basically nothing. His financial situation is, by almost any measure, genuinely excellent. And yet somehow, this is also a man who eats dry noodles alone in his apartment, wears clothes from when he was 16 that are full of holes and too small for his body, and takes cold showers not because the hot water is broken, but because he simply will not allow himself to turn the dial. Picture that for a second. A grown adult man, financially comfortable, standing in a cold shower every single morning by choice. Not by necessity. Not by accident. By deliberate, active refusal to give himself something as small and as basic as warmth. And then stepping out, shivering, pulling on a shirt that is fraying at the collar and straining across the shoulders because it has not fit him properly in nearly a decade, and heading out into the world like that is just fine. Let that sit for a second. Nobody is forcing him to do any of this. There is no financial crisis pressing down on him. There is no emergency draining his accounts. There is no landlord to pay, no mortgage hanging over his head, no pile of bills waiting on the kitchen counter. There is no reason on earth that this man cannot buy himself a decent shirt or wait 30 seconds for his shower to warm up. And yet here we are, somehow, talking about a man who has every material resource available to him and is choosing, actively and repeatedly, none of them. So what is actually going on here? Because this is not just someone being a bit frugal or a bit old-fashioned about money. This is something deeper and honestly a lot more uncomfortable to look at directly. This is a person who has built an entire identity around denying himself comfort, and what makes it so exhausting to be around is that he is not even at peace with it. He complains constantly. He notices when other people are well-dressed, the kind of noticing where you can see it on someone's face, a flicker of longing that disappears just as fast as it appears. He knows his cologne smells bad. He wishes his skin was clearer and his haircut was better. He has, somewhere underneath all of that deliberate deprivation, a vision of himself that looks quite different from the reality he is choosing every single day. He is not content. He is just refusing to do anything about it. And that gap, the space between what he wants and what he will allow himself to have, is exactly where all of this pain is living. That is the part that really gets under your skin, is it not? If he was genuinely unbothered, if he truly did not care about any of these things, it would be one thing. You could respect someone who simply did not place value on appearances or creature comforts. That would actually be a coherent philosophy. Plenty of people live simply and find real peace in it. But that is not what this is. This is a man who cares deeply, complains openly, and then refuses every single solution offered to him. That combination is exhausting in a way that is very hard to explain to someone who has not lived with it. It creates this strange, suffocating loop where nothing ever gets better and every attempt to improve anything gets swatted away, and you are left standing there holding out something good and watching it get refused again and again until eventually you start wondering if there is something wrong with you for even trying. What he is doing has a name in some psychology circles, and it sits somewhere in the territory of self-punishment or deeply ingrained shame around personal pleasure. Some people who grow up in households where spending money on yourself was either not allowed or heavily criticized internalize the message that wanting things for yourself is wrong. It becomes almost moral. Like enjoying a warm shower or buying clothes that fit is somehow a character flaw. The guilt becomes so automatic and so seamlessly woven into the fabric of daily life that it does not even feel like guilt anymore. It just feels like who they are. It becomes their personality. It becomes their identity. And by the time someone else comes along and points it out, they genuinely cannot see it from the outside the way everyone around them can, because from the inside it just feels like being sensible, being disciplined, being good. The thing is though, he is not just suffering quietly. He is making sure everyone around him knows about it. He complains about his clothes, his cologne, his haircut, his skin, his food, his shower. He narrates his own discomfort constantly, like a running commentary on everything he is going without. And that is actually a really important piece of the puzzle, because people who genuinely have no desire for these things do not spend this much time talking about them. He wants someone to notice. He wants someone to care that he is doing without. Whether that is a bid for validation, a leftover habit from a dynamic in his childhood where suffering was the only thing that got him seen, or something else entirely is hard to say without knowing him personally. But the performance of suffering is very much part of what is happening here. And then there is the way he reacts when solutions are offered. She points out a nice outfit that would suit him. He gets completely enraged. Not mildly annoyed. Not quietly resistant. Enraged, the way someone gets when they feel threatened rather than helped. She offers to help him buy new clothes. He refuses. She tries to dispose of genuinely dangerous expired food that no reasonable person would serve to someone they loved, and he throws a fit like something precious has been taken from him. She takes him to find something he actually likes. He shuts it down. Every single exit from the suffering gets blocked. Every door gets closed, sometimes gently, sometimes with a kind of anger that does not quite make sense given the stakes. And that tells you something really important, which is that the suffering is not actually the problem he is trying to solve. The suffering is the point. Now here is where it gets really concerning. She said something in her post that I do not want to gloss over, because it is actually the most alarming detail in the whole thing. She said his behavior has started to imprint on her. She feels guilty for replacing her own shoes when they have holes in them. She feels bad for showering with warm water. She questions herself for having a smoothie in the morning instead of stale bread. She is starting to internalize his value system, except his value system is built on deprivation and shame. And here is what makes that so insidious. She probably did not notice it happening. That is never how it works. It was not a single conversation or a single moment. It was the slow, steady accumulation of being around someone who treats every small comfort as a moral failure, until one day you are standing in your own shower feeling guilty about the temperature of the water, and you do not even remember when that started feeling normal. That right there is how this kind of thing spreads. It does not happen all at once. It does not arrive with a warning or announce itself clearly. It happens slowly, in small moments, through repeated exposure to someone who treats basic self-care as something to be ashamed of. And once you start feeling guilty for your own normal human needs, once that guilt becomes the background noise of your daily life, you are in a very different place than where you started. Now I want to be fair here and acknowledge that there is almost certainly something genuinely painful underneath all of this for him. People do not develop this kind of relationship with self-denial out of nowhere. There is usually a history, whether that is growing up in scarcity even if things are better now, a parent who shamed spending, a belief system that equates comfort with weakness, or some form of anxiety that has never been properly named let alone addressed. There is probably a version of this man's childhood where money was tight and treating yourself to anything felt dangerous, and even though the financial reality has completely changed, the emotional reality never got the memo. The nervous system does not automatically update when the bank account does. None of that makes his behavior okay, but it does mean that this is not simply stubbornness or selfishness. This likely goes pretty deep, into places that he himself may not have the language or the self-awareness to access yet. The real question she is asking, which is how do you gently encourage someone like this to change, is unfortunately one of the hardest questions in all of interpersonal relationships. Because the uncomfortable truth is that you cannot want someone's healing more than they want it themselves. You can point to every door. You can offer to walk through it with them. You can hold the door open with both hands and stand there for as long as you can manage. But if they keep closing those doors, and he does, every single time, without hesitation, then there is a limit to what encouragement can accomplish. The work has to be his. The desire to change has to come from inside him, and right now there is very little evidence that it does. What she can do is name what she is observing clearly and without making it a fight. Not in a moment of frustration after he has just refused something reasonable, but in a calm and genuine conversation at a neutral time. Something like telling him that she has noticed he seems really unhappy with a lot of things in his life, and that she would love to support him in actually addressing them, but that she is struggling to understand what is getting in the way. And then actually listen. Not to fix it in that moment, not to have a solution ready to deploy before he is even finished speaking, but to genuinely hear whether he has any self-awareness about the pattern. His response to that conversation, both what he says and how he says it, will tell her a great deal about where he actually is. She might also want to suggest that he talk to a therapist. Not as an insult, not as a diagnosis, not as something she lobs at him in the middle of a disagreement, but as something genuinely kind, offered in a moment of warmth and sincerity. Because what he is describing, the compulsive self-denial, the refusal of comfort, the guilt around pleasure, the rage that surfaces whenever someone tries to disrupt the pattern, these are things that therapy is genuinely well equipped to help with. A good therapist can help him trace the origin of these patterns without shame, which is something she cannot do for him no matter how much she loves him. If he is resistant to that idea too, if that door also gets shut in her face, then she has her answer about where he is in terms of willingness to change. And finally, she needs to protect herself. She needs to be really clear and intentional about not letting his guilt-based worldview become her worldview. Her warm shower is not something to apologize for. Her shoes with holes are allowed to be replaced. Her smoothie is not a moral failing. She gets to have nice things. She gets to take care of herself. And if she is with someone who, even indirectly, even without meaning to, makes her feel otherwise on a daily basis, that is worth taking very seriously. Okay, here is the part one cannot dance around. The 5-month-old eggs. That was not quirky. That was not endearing. That was not a harmless little character flaw that you roll your eyes at and move on from. That was a person making a decision that put his girlfriend's health at serious risk because he could not handle the idea of throwing away food. She ended up in the emergency room. She sat in a hospital, probably frightened and in pain, because he served her something that should have been in the bin months before she ever ate it. And his response when she tries to prevent it from happening again is not remorse or concern or even a quiet acknowledgement that something went very wrong. It is a fit. A genuine, disproportionate, angry reaction to her trying to protect both of them from a repeat of an outcome that landed her in emergency care. That is not a personality quirk. That is a boundary that was crossed in a significant and dangerous way, and it needs to be treated as such, not softened, not contextualized away, not filed under quirky boyfriend behavior. She deserves a partner who, at the absolute minimum, does not poison her. She also deserves a partner who can grow, who can accept care, who can extend to himself the same basic dignity he would extend to anyone else, and who is capable of letting the people who love him do the same. Whether he is capable of becoming that person right now is genuinely unclear. What is clear is that she cannot be the one to force it. She can offer support. She can offer patience. She can offer the conversation and the gentle pointing toward help. But she cannot do the work for him, and she cannot afford to keep shrinking herself in the meantime. The verdict here is not complicated even if the situation feels complicated. His behavior has a cause and that cause deserves compassion. But compassion does not mean tolerating being hospitalized because he will not throw out old food. It does not mean watching your own sense of self-worth erode because you feel guilty about warm water. She needs to have the hard conversation, encourage him toward real help, and then pay very close attention to whether he actually moves toward it. Because wanting him to change is not enough. He has to want it too. Final word count, 2515. He earns 6 figures, lives in a free flat, and still eats moldy food while blaming everyone else. She found out her husband was fired for sexual harassment. She was already trying to figure out if she could salvage 8 years of marriage. 8 years of shared meals, shared beds, shared bank accounts, shared children. 8 years of building something together and telling herself it was good enough, or maybe even genuinely good, and now she had to look at all of it differently, through a new and unflattering light. And then he went and got suspended from his next job for doing the exact same thing. Some people will tell you that everyone deserves a second chance. And in a lot of situations, that is true. But a second chance is something you earn by showing that you understand what you did wrong, that you have done the work to change, and that you are committed to not doing it again. It is not a free pass that automatically resets the moment you find new employment. That distinction matters a lot in this story. Let us start from the beginning, because the original situation is already complicated enough before you add the update. Her husband was fired after messaging a female colleague on Facebook, someone who was lower than him in the workplace hierarchy, after she had shown him some form of interest first. He claims the messages were not sexual and that he only asked for a clothed photo. He deleted the messages before she could see them. The company investigated and fired him. HR does not typically fire people for asking someone to send a picture of their Halloween costume. That detail is worth sitting with. HR investigations are not trigger-happy. They take time, they involve multiple people, and they require documentation, interviews, and a level of institutional will that does not appear out of nowhere. They result in termination only when the evidence meets a certain threshold, a threshold that is often higher than most people assume, because companies know that firing someone opens them up to wrongful termination claims. They do not love firing employees. It creates paperwork and potential legal exposure and morale problems and a hole in the org chart that someone has to fill. When they do it anyway, it is because they concluded the behavior was serious enough to justify all of that. Whatever was in those messages, the people whose job it was to evaluate them decided it was bad enough to end his employment. That is not a small thing. And he deleted them before his wife could read them. He controlled the narrative from the start, sat her down and offered her the most sanitized possible version of events, shaped the story with careful hands, and made sure she had no way to verify any of it independently. Think about what that moment must have felt like for her. He is looking her in the eye, telling her his version, and somewhere in the back of her mind she probably already knows that she is only getting the version he decided she could handle. That is not the behavior of someone who made a mistake and owns it. That is the behavior of someone managing damage. Oh, he deleted the messages. Right. Just a totally normal thing an innocent person does. She was still processing all of this, still trying to decide whether to stay or go, still untangling what 8 years of marriage meant in light of this information, when she posted to Reddit asking for help. And you have to understand what that kind of post takes. It takes admitting to strangers that your life has cracked open. It takes typing out the details that feel most shameful and most painful and hitting send anyway because you are desperate enough to need outside perspective. The fact that she was even asking the question shows how much she was trying to be fair. She was not rage posting. She was not looking for permission to explode. She was genuinely uncertain, trying to weigh everything, trying to figure out the right thing to do. The replies she got clearly pushed her toward clarity, because the update tells us she decided to end the marriage shortly after posting. That took real courage. She had kids. She only worked part-time. He had nowhere to go. Every practical factor made leaving harder, every number in every spreadsheet said stay, and she still chose it anyway. That matters. That tells you something about how clearly she could see the situation once she stopped trying to justify it. But here is where the story takes a turn that honestly stopped me in my tracks. After the separation, he had a mental health crisis serious enough that she let him continue living in the house while things stabilized. Picture what that arrangement looks like. The marriage is over. She has already made her choice. She knows what he did and what it means. And he is still there, in the house, sleeping under the same roof, eating in the same kitchen, because she could not bring herself to throw a man in crisis out into nothing. That was a genuinely kind thing to do under circumstances that did not require kindness from her at all. She had every right to tell him to figure it out on his own. She did not. She gave him space and time to get back on his feet, quietly absorbing the discomfort of that situation so he did not have to hit the pavement while he was falling apart. He eventually found a new job. Okay. New start. Clean slate. Except then he got suspended from that job. For sexually harassing someone again. Same pattern. Different workplace. Different person. Same outcome. Let me be very clear about what that means. This was not one bad decision made in a moment of weakness that he regretted and could not stop thinking about. This is a pattern. A pattern that survived job loss, marriage breakdown, a mental health crisis, divorce proceedings, and a second chance at employment. None of those things changed his behavior. None of those consequences were enough to make him stop and genuinely reckon with himself. He just waited until he had a new environment, new coworkers, a fresh start with people who did not know his history, and did it again like none of it had ever happened. That is the thing about patterns. They do not disappear because circumstances change. They follow people. They travel light. They fit in a suitcase and relocate without any trouble at all. And the only thing that actually interrupts a pattern like this is genuine internal work, the kind that is uncomfortable and slow and usually requires professional help over a significant period of time. There is no evidence that he did any of that work in the time between the first firing and the second suspension. He just got a new job and picked up where he left off. Now she is preparing to sell the house. The house that probably has years of ordinary life baked into its walls, first steps and birthday cakes and Sunday mornings. She and the kids are moving in with her parents while they get back on their feet, trading the life she built for a smaller, temporary version of it while she figures out what comes next. She has accepted that his mental health is no longer her responsibility. And in her own words, she says that when she made the original post she already knew deep down what she needed to do. She just had not come to terms yet with how completely her life was about to change. That line broke my heart a little, honestly. Because that is such a real and human thing. Knowing something and being ready to accept it are two completely different things. She was not in denial exactly. She was in grief. Grieving a marriage, a life she had built, a version of her future that no longer existed, the person she thought he was, the story she thought she was living inside. And she had to sit with that grief long enough to find the ground underneath it and take the next step. She has 2 kids watching all of this. They are going to see their mother make a hard choice with dignity. They are going to see her protect herself and them even when it cost her almost everything she had built. They are going to watch her rebuild from a smaller starting point and refuse to be defined by what happened to her. That is not a small thing. That is actually one of the most important things a parent can do, which is to show their children what it looks like to recognize when something is broken beyond repair and to choose yourself anyway. The verdict here is as clear as it gets. He was fired for sexual harassment. He was given time, space, support he did not have to receive, and a chance to stabilize. He used that stability to find another job and sexually harass someone there too. There is no version of this story where she should have stayed. There is no version where more patience or more chances would have produced a different outcome. He told her exactly who he was twice, in 2 different workplaces, with 2 different people, under 2 different sets of circumstances. She did the right thing. Full stop. And she did it even when it was financially complicated, even when it meant uprooting her whole life, even when he was in crisis and her instinct was probably to fix it. She held the line anyway. That took more strength than most people realize. The thing I want anyone watching this to take away is that a second chance has to be earned, and earning it looks like changed behavior, not just changed locations. Remorse without transformation is just words. Apology without accountability is performance. She saw through it. Eventually. And she got out. That is the ending this story deserved. So which story hit you harder? Drop it in the comments because I genuinely need to know. And if you want more stories like these, a like and subscribe would mean a lot.